Hey guys, I'm the 50s Kid. This is a 1991 Toyota 4Runner. It's got a slipping clutch. Basically, whenever you're out driving and you're changing gears, it takes a really long time for each gear shift to complete. And if you mash on the gas, it's basically gonna take forever and ever and ever. The engine's gonna rev a little too high. And then if you let off the gas, the shift will finally complete. That's a slipping clutch. I've known the problem was there for quite a while. The last time I saw this truck, I actually did U-joints on the rear drive shaft, and I saw the problem back then. So I ordered a clutch set. It's here. It's time to do the job. I figure I'd take you along, so let's get started. This is the back of the transmission. We basically have to get rid of this rear drive shaft, this whole transmission mounting support frame, and then we have to get rid of this front drive shaft. We've got to get rid of the speedometer cable that's screwed into the back of the transmission, unplug a couple electrical connectors, and then unbolt the starter that's in the front where the transmission meets the engine, and then we'll unbolt the transmission from the engine, get it out of there. So there are 4 bolts on the front of the rear drive shaft, 4 bolts on the rear. You might find it easy if you shift into neutral, spin the drive shaft around to get the bolt where you need it, then just shift it back into first to hold it in place. That way you can unbolt it. You need to jack up the rear axle, get it up off the ground if you want to be able to spin the drive shaft around so you can get at all the bolts. There you go, 4 fasteners removed. And there are 4 more bolts on the rear of the drive shaft. There are 2 bolts holding this little splash shield on. In order to stay organized, I like to store the bolts with each part that I take off. Now we're going to loosen the front sway bar. There are 2 bolts up here and 2 more bolts over there. We're going to get the dust shield off of the rear of the front drive shaft. There are 2 bolts here and 2 bolts here. To get the lower transmission support brace out of there, it looks like there are 4 fasteners on each side, as well as 4 fasteners inside here that hold the transmission mount to the brace. 2 there and 2 there. I'm suspending the transmission with my floor jack on the bottom of the transfer case right here. That way I can take the transmission support bar out of there. It looks like somebody used some duct tape to hold the rear oxygen sensor wire to the transmission support brace, so I'm going to remove that. Now you can get off the bolts that hold the rear of the front drive shaft to the transfer case. Of course, it helps to have the front wheel suspended off the ground. That way you can rotate the drive shaft around. To get it to lock in place, shift your transmission into first, and then you want to shift into low 4 or high 4 so that the transfer case is locked. You want to do the lower 2 first, and then remove the lower 2 on the front of the drive shaft. That way you only have to spin it around once. Now we can get this front drive shaft out of here. Looks like we got 2 electrical connectors here and here. This is probably for the reverse lights, and this is probably for the transfer case. And we also need to remove this speedo cable. It's a 22mm wrench. And it looks like it's broken off. That must be why the speedometer is not working in the car. Next, we're going to get off the starter. You can do that through the passenger tire well, the right tire well. You can see there's a little access panel right there. And I've got 2 bolts here. There's supposed to be 4 though. We're going to disconnect the battery. You can't see them, but there are 2 bolts for the starter. There's one down here, which I've already removed, and then there's one up in the back. And you just have to get in there with long extensions. So the front one is a bolt, the back one is a nut. They're both 14. So then you can just reach in and set the starter aside. So the front sway bar is sort of interfering with my transmission jack. It's just going to make it a little bit difficult to pump the handle, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove it. There are 2 14s holding it to the front suspension, and you just need a deep socket to get at them. Next, we're going to remove the slave cylinder from the side of the transmission by removing these 2 bolts. I'm going to remove this exhaust hanger and this exhaust bracket from the side of the engine. Looks like we're missing a bolt right at the top there. So I believe the only thing holding the transmission to the engine at this point are 3 more bolts along the bottom and then 2 along the top. Actually, there's 1 bolt up right there along the side where the clutch actually screws in. You can see it's a 17. So I need to exchange my floor jack for my transmission jack. And to do that, I need to get my floor jack out of the way because it's in the way of where my floor jack is going to go. So to do that, I'm actually going to stick a piece of wood between the engine oil pan and the front differential. That way I'm just going to be able to lower the jack, and that will prevent the whole engine and transmission from falling down too far. So there we go, transmission jacks all braced up and we're ready to go. So now would be a good time to actually remove these shift levers. Looks like we got 4 bolts, 2 on either side, to just get this cover off. And a little bit of bending has actually got this cover up and out of here, unveiling all sorts of junk. I'm gonna need to actually get the knobs off and get all these boots up off of here. It looks like this one unscrews. And this one should unscrew as well, but I'm having some trouble with it, so I gotta work at it. I was able to just use a rubber strap wrench to get it loose without damaging it. Now we can lift these boots up off of here. So this boot is being a little difficult, so some silicone spray should do the trick. So now I'll just remove these bolts in order to get the shifters out. So there's one. I'm gonna get some tape real quick to go over here to prevent dirt from falling in. And there's the other shift lever out, along with a little spacer. And there we go, all taped up and ready to go. So to get enough tilt on the engine so that I can get at those top 2 bolts, I've removed the piece of wood from between the oil pan and the differential. That's let the transmission come down a little bit more, and now I should be able to snake across it with some long extensions and get those top 2 bolts out of there. So I actually got both of those bolts out through the transmission tunnel, which is pretty nice. Yeah, so we have all the bolts out, and it just should be a matter of wiggling this thing and getting it free. I did put the piece of wood back in, by the way. You know what, guys? It looks like there's one bolt that goes in from the front of the engine right here. This is on the driver's side, the left side. So I'm going to remove this bolt right now. And now, of course, she's slipping right out. That is a victory. So as it turns out, the exhaust actually holds the engine up nicely, and you don't need that piece of wood underneath the oil pan. To remove the pressure plate, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts all around. So to get the flywheel off, we've just got 6 17mm bolts. So you can see here the damage to the pressure plate. A nice groove worn in there by the rivets right here. So she down to the rivets. Junk. So I think we got pretty far. We'll put it all back together in part 2, so stay tuned. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. I'm the 50s Kid. Thanks a lot for watching.